Okay, good evening. So tonight will be a special lecture. We will actually begin a series of important lectures. And tonight I would call a sequel, a follow-up to the one I gave on the coronavirus almost a year ago. A very important lecture in itself. And I gave the lecture tonight the following title: A Universal Vaccine. What is that universal vaccine? Don't be immune to criticism. The reason I chose to speak about vaccines in general is because that's what the news is all about these days. Vaccination, becoming hopefully immune to the coronavirus. But I think it would be a good idea to give a brief introduction as to what is a vaccine. A lot of people are really not familiar with what exactly happens when they are vaccinated. What does it mean to become immune? I'm not going to get into all the terms. There are some very technical terms in this area of medicine, but just a little bit of a brief description of the differences between vaccination, inoculation, and immunization. So what is a vaccine? Even though vaccine and inoculation are somewhat used synonymously, in the olden days, what really happened, I'm talking about many, many years ago, was a method of inoculation. Vaccination is a later term. And what they did in order to treat certain dangerous diseases, like smallpox, was to use the actual microbe in a weaker form from the disease and implant it into the individual, obviously before he's sick, in order to inoculate him. And what that means is by introducing a small dosage of this weaker form of the disease, hopefully what will happen, as they have proven of course, that the immune system will be stimulated. The immune system that we all have is a system which fights off all kinds of diseases that attempt to penetrate the body and cause havoc. So God created an incredible system of defense, and many, many times we don't even realize it, but the body is working on thwarting all of these attempts to infiltrate the body and make it sick. And sometimes, unfortunately, these infiltrations succeed and we become sick. The immune system is overpowered. So when this immune system is stimulated, what happens is it produces something called antibodies. And these antibodies, I'm going to simplify it, basically have a very good memory. Because what happens is you are creating an adaptive or an acquired immune system, which is a secondary immune system, which actually has a memory. It now identifies certain pathogens so that in the future, if it meets up with them, it will be able to fight them off as it does initially in the weaker form. So this, of course, has been used successfully to treat smallpox and all kinds of diseases that were very, very dangerous. And polio, if you recall, was another one. Tuberculosis, measles, mumps, all of these. There is a whole long list of diseases that are successfully treated today or are somewhat restrained from spreading. Today, a vaccine is not necessarily a form of inoculation, but a particular treatment where they take a microbe that could be even dead from something else, not from the real disease itself, but even from something else, to treat the particular disease. And they've been very successful in doing so. We see the results, we see the numbers of people who are sick all over the world is a lot less than it was in the past. Actually, even anti-venom, which is something that they use to treat a bite by a poisonous snake, is something that works along the same principles, even though it's done differently, because whatever it is that they inject it into an animal, and it's from the animal's antibodies that they actually treat the human being. That's pretty much the only difference. But also follows the same principles. Billions of dollars are spent on medicine. As you know, there's a lot of research that goes on, and it's definitely been a great help to humanity. But billions of dollars are also being spent to go to space and to explore all kinds of things that are beyond the reach of man. So the question is, why not spend billions of dollars on research on how to improve human relationships? That is not done. I don't hear about billions of dollars being spent on research. Imagine if the entire world cooperated as they are right now. They have no choice. They have to work together as fast as possible to find a cure to this disease. People are dying from it. But so are people dying spiritually. Relationships are falling apart. There's so many divorces. You know, it's interesting how we know so much about the earth. Science has advanced so much that we really know a lot about what is going on earth. But we don't know so much about ourselves. So why not work on a vaccine that will hopefully treat anger, as an example, selfishness, and prejudice would be another example. There are all kinds of symptoms out there that are very, very destructive. And actually, these are more destructive than the other illnesses because these actually cause major wars. They have throughout our history, and even this day. Look at all the wars, all the battles, all the major problems that nations have, that human beings have, because of the symptoms that I just mentioned. Prejudice or hatred towards others, anger, selfishness. These are things that have not been treated. These are things that are rampant all over. I like to point out another fact is that so many books have been published on dieting. Just go to any bookstore and you will see shelves and shelves of books on how to diet, different methods and approaches. And I'm not saying they're no good, and I'm definitely going to say that they're important. I think people should exercise and go on a diet if necessary, and be careful with what they eat, of course. But so much on the physical body, but not enough information on the area of self-improvement. By the way, on the area of self-improvement, I have a whole series of lectures as well that we've done years ago, dealing with the various characteristics, how to deal with them in a professional way, some good advice, helpful advice. You have to want. If you don't want, all of this information is not going to help. You first have to want. And we're going to talk about that another time. Some people are going to say, well, if you had God in your life, maybe that would make a difference. I have some news to tell you. Even though I always like to say that having God in one's life can make a difference, but sadly, it's not enough. We have a lot of people who are religious, observant. They have God in their life, but they still have these problems of anger management, can't control themselves. So it's not enough. What's necessary? What is missing in their life? I think the best term is checks and balances. You've heard of that term? I'm not talking about the checks and balances in Congress. The way the United States government works is that there's checks and balances between the House, the Senate, judiciary branch, legislative branch. You have all of these branches that are supposed to check on each other. There's supposed to be a certain balance in the power. Otherwise, you'd have here an oligarchy of sorts. It would be too much control in one person or in a few people. That would not be good. So there's a need of checks and balances in government, of course. But the checks and balances that I'm talking about is on a personal level. If you look at the Torah portion, Parshat Shoftim, it says as follows: Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha b'chol she'arecha. There the Torah discusses the importance of setting up judges and a police force of some sort, officials that will be responsible for society. B'chol she'arecha, in all your gates. You need to live with law and order. So that makes sense. But there's another interpretation for shoftim v'shotrim titel lecha. It's not necessarily that you should set up a system in your country, but you should have a system of checks and balances for yourself on a personal level. Self-examination. That's important. Check out yourself. Are you okay or not okay? But this is not easy. Why is this not easy to set up checks and balances for oneself? Because what's missing is the ability for a person to self-criticism. Self-criticism is the ability for one to judge himself, to examine himself, and that's something which is very, very far from people. It's out of reach. It is easy, it comes easy to them to criticize others, but to criticize themselves, to look at themselves, to examine themselves, they're like that. And as I said earlier, there's something called inoculation. Yes, these people are inoculated from criticism. You see the connection here? Yes, inoculation, but from criticism, they're going to have a hard time accepting criticism from others. You see, it's not easy. It becomes very difficult for them to accept criticism from others. In order to understand this subject a little bit better, more in depth, I've given a lecture, which I'll give you the link later, about how to rebuke. Many years ago we spoke about the importance of rebuke, how to rebuke, and this is similar. And what I'm going to do now is just give you a little bit of a background as to why exactly in this generation more than ever we're seeing this more of a problem. That is, that people are not willing to hear what others have to say. They cannot take the criticism so easily. The rabbis tell us that this is what's going to happen before Mashiach comes. In the Messianic era, it's going to be a time when you will notice the following symptoms. And by the way, when you notice them, you know that Mashiach is coming very soon. And one of them is en tochacha. There's no one that can successfully rebuke others. People will not take easily to criticism. And the question is, why not? Why will they have such a hard time more than before? What's so unique about this generation that people will have a difficult time accepting criticism? So if you follow the Talmud, you will see that the Talmud characterizes that particular generation with the following symptoms, which all explain, in part, why rebuke is so difficult. One, haemet ne'ederet, truth will be lacking. What does it mean, truth will be lacking? Well, it does not only mean that everyone will have a different opinion. There will be a lack of leadership, of consensus as to what is right and what is wrong. So the truth is lacking. We don't know who has the truth. Everybody will claim that they have the truth. The Democrats, the Republicans, and so forth, if we're talking about this country. But this will apply in any country. Truth is lacking. There's no leadership. There's no one that we can look up to and say, yes, please teach us. You have the truth. And the reason why this truth is lacking, now more than ever, is because there's a lot of choshech, a lot of darkness, as the prophets point out. This darkness, this choshech, is indicative of tremendous bilbul, tremendous confusion. People will be confused about a lot of things that are going on, and they will therefore lack direction. And so with all this confusion, with all these problems going on, today more than ever, this will produce a certain darkness. People will be lost. People will not know what will make them happy. Some will try anything, including drugs, because they don't know. Nobody taught them that money doesn't bring happiness. On the contrary, money brought misery to many people, especially those that got the money very quickly, like in the lotto. So what makes people happy? There's an emphasis on motarot, on materialism, which I also have a whole lecture about. There's actually a whole series of lectures about the challenges in the 20th and 21st century. What is going on? People cannot make sense of all this. But the problem is, one of the problems is that they are focused on the wrong things. What else do we have that the rabbis describe? Chutzpah, yizgeh. There will be an increase in chutzpah, impudence. Even the children will not respect their parents. If you look back in time, 50, 60 years ago, that was not the case. Kids used to kiss the hands of the father and the mother. Where do you see that? Today they tell off their parents. They think they know better. It's everywhere. Unfortunately, this is so sad, it's painful to see. But this is one of the phenomena that we see in our times. There's no shame, a lack of respect for the elders and for the previous generation. And what does that cause when you have so much chutzpah and disrespect? People don't care about authority. And what happens when people don't look up to authority? You have anarchy, which you see down in the streets of many cities. Wow, why is it happening now? You have a lot of liberalism. So the values are changing. There's no respect for authority. Look how all of this is happening together at the same time approximately. So criticism? Who wants to hear criticism? Criticism is something very noble, to be able to accept it, to be able to listen to somebody's advice, to be able to accept it and make changes if necessary. People are so far from it. The Gemara goes on to explain that another symptom that you will notice is that those who are trying to do the right thing, those who are God-fearing, they will be despised and looked down. Chokhmat sofrim tisrach, knowledge, especially knowledge of the Torah, tisrach, it will be petrified. In other words, it won't be valued. People will treat it as, oh, this is something primitive. We have other ideas today. This is from the past. This is something that is not relevant to our times. That is how they will treat it. That is how they will look at it. Something that was acceptable to everyone. Take a quick example of abortion. You know that abortion in the past, in this country, years ago, was understood as something that should not be done. Obviously, it depends on the circumstances. I'm not going to get into the details of when it is something to consider as, as an emergency situation. There are situations where abortion may be possible, but we're not dealing with those exceptions. As a rule, in the past, people looked down at it, people understood. And today, everybody's fighting for the right to choose. So I'm not going to get into the argument. The question really here is, what happened that people's minds changed, the values have changed? Is that okay? No, something so holy as the life of a human being, people should not have a different opinion today than they did in the past, unless of course it's something better. But to go from good to bad, from a positive attitude to a negative attitude, in other words, that life is no longer as important to them, it says something. It says something about the people. So there's no need to argue about it now. The question solely is, why does this change occur? This is a fact. I'm not making anything up here. The fact is that everywhere in the world, we're not just talking about Judaism right now, people valued life. And partially the answer is because there were many diseases that did away with many people. People did not live long. A lot of babies died. So you did not want to, on your own, contribute towards, giving up on a life. Whereas today, it's disposable. There's too many people. How are we going to feed all of them? There are people talking like that. Oh, just disconnect him from the machine. He's not conscious anyway. He's in a coma. He's not going to improve. Don't make him suffer so much. People have this very lax attitude towards life. Do you know what this life is all about? Do you know that it has value even in this kind of a state? It's painful, of course. People don't understand the meaning of life. What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of pain and suffering? So much has changed over the years. So you can understand how this also takes a toll on the ability to accept criticism. People are discovering something called today fake news. What's that? Well, there's a lot of falsehood. There's a lot of fake stuff. Even the diamonds a lot of women wear today are fake. They're not the real thing. For other reasons. Everything is fake. A lot of things, people are fake. What's happening? What's going on? Where is their integrity? So all of this fake leads to what's called hypocrisy, on which I have also a whole lecture. What is hypocrisy? How could people be hypocritic? How could they have double standards? It's another symptom, but today it's seen even more than ever. But this is all the same thing. It's all part of the same generation where there's no truth. People are not so interested in the truth. Even if you show them the way, they're not so interested in it. If we were to characterize all of this in a few words, I think the best way to do so is to quote Rabbi Elyahu in his famous book Michtav Eliyahu on ethics. And he says like this, Hara shebalev mema'in lekabel hatov. It is the evil or the impurity in one's heart that refuses to accept that which is good for him. In other words, there's some ra, some impurity, some evil, something not good in one's heart that refuses to accept that which is good. This is good for you. You know, a lot of kids and even adults who are told, take this medicine, it will really help you with whatever problem you have. You know, a lot of people refuse. They actually refuse. And it's proven that this medicine will actually help them, calm them down, or whatever it is. Somehow they refuse. But I'm not going to get into all the reasons of why people refuse. It's just a fact that not everybody is willing to take the medicine that's good for them. And here Rabbi Desta says, there's a lot of ra. There's ra. There's something impure in the heart that sometimes, this is what it does. It refuses the offer of something good. And what is that ra exactly? Hashkafot ra'ot, the wrong outlook that people have, the wrong values. So if the heart right now has a layer of all of this bad, all of this wrong attitudes and values in how they see life and how they see the world, then if you introduce or offer something which is different, something which is positive and good, it will automatically reject it. The bad will not want the good. That's it. Another way of saying it is that the desire, the strong desire for the physicality, for materialism is so powerful that it refuses to consider spirituality. They two contradict each other. So if one is very attached to materialism, he won't want to hear. He won't be comfortable. He'll reject it. That which is spiritual nature. He says, what's this? I want to live a normal, comfortable life. Don't bother me with all this. They don't realize how good this will be for them. It's automatically rejected. Another deficiency today, or I should say another weakness that people have today in accepting criticism, is because the people who are criticizing them are not necessarily better than them. So imagine if they hear criticism from someone who may be deficient in that same area, who may have that same weakness. Who are you to tell me this if you yourself act like that? You see what I mean? This happens a lot. People cannot really be a voice in telling others what to do if they themselves are not stronger, at least, in that particular area. So you don't have really good examples today to follow. Who are you going to look up to? People have lost respect for the elders. They're not interested in this knowledge that was considered so valuable in the past. Their values have changed. So you see how it becomes more and more difficult for people to relate to criticism properly. But criticism or rebuke is something very important. The Torah tells us, you see something wrong on someone over whom you have some influence, you have a mitzvah. You're commanded to point it out to him. You're wrong. This is not right what you're doing. It's our responsibility, especially if you have any degree of influence, a relative, close friend, and a neighbor. As long as you don't know that they're not going to listen at all, they're going to make fun of you, you have to try. It's a mitzvah. You may actually have a positive effect on him, you may influence him, he may change his mind. Rabbis also tell us that Ezu derech she'evor lo adam, what is a good path that man should choose for himself? Yohav et hatochachot. He should like and welcome criticism and rebuke from others. That is something good. He should welcome it. He should want it. He should want to hear from others. Tell me, point out to me, is there anything that I'm doing that is not right, that needs to be corrected? So, what is the advice? How do we go about actually adopting that attitude of welcoming criticism? Where do we start? The place to begin is actually something that the rabbis encourage us to do with K'neh lecha chaber. Acquire for yourself a friend, a very good friend. Make sure that you really have someone who you're close to very, very much. Why? Not because he will give you a hand when you need one. Because if he rebukes you, you possibly will listen to him. Because this is your friend. Supposedly he cares about you. This is not someone else who you might suspect, he has some interest. Who is he to tell me? People react very, very negatively to criticism for all kinds of reasons. This is one. Who is he? How does he know? Right? They don't like it. But when it's your friend, someone who's close to you, hopefully he means your well-being. He doesn't want to accuse you of something for no reason. And in Spanish there's a beautiful saying, Quien bien te quiere te hará llorar. Have you heard that? Someone who really cares about you, who really loves you, will make you cry. In other words, yes, it may be painful, but they really love you. They're not afraid of making you cry. Neither should you be afraid or ashamed of it, because it's coming from someone who cares about you. This particular saying, I think, comes from the pasuk, from the verse in Mishlei. Ne'emanim pitzei ohev ve'na'atarot neshikot soneh. The wounds of ohev, of someone who cares about you, who loves you, ne'emanim, they're faithful. They're wounds, but they're faithful. Ve'na'atarot neshikot soneh, but the kisses of an enemy are burdensome. In other words, you know how some people greet each other with a kiss? 3 times, not once. Kiss number 1 on the one cheek, kiss number 2 on the second cheek, and then one more. I don't know why there's 3, maybe they like odd numbers, but it's not a real kiss. It's burdensome, it's just a ritual and it's meaningless. Is that what you want? Is that what you prefer? Shlomo Melech, Solomon is telling us you should prefer the wounds of a good friend because they are faithful. They are real, not the kisses of an enemy. In Romanian, there's also a saying, which I think is based on Judaism, Cel ce vede la semenusa ceva incorrect, trebuie să dojenească. One who sees something that is not right in his fellow man should rebuke him, should criticize him, should point it out to him. He needs to do so. You can't just ignore it. In other words, if you are ignoring it, that means that you don't care about the person. That's what it really means. So if you care about someone that is in your sphere of influence, you need to. You have no choice. A lot of people don't know this, but in Judaism, there's an emphasis on the wife's role. There's a man's role, there's a wife's role in the house. It's important to realize this, that everyone has a role. It's not so much about equality. A lot of people complain there's a lack of equality. You look down at the women and all kinds of things that they say that are not true. On the contrary, in Judaism, a woman is looked up to. She's a princess. She should be treated like one. She's the mother of the children. You should trust her. You should show her the affection and give her the time. You know, the nature of men and women are very, very different. And this is, of course, a challenge. This in itself is a challenge, no matter how good the chemistry between them is. So the Torah, the rabbis tell us, be careful with the respect that you give your spouse because she deserves a lot of it. And when is it the most difficult to give a person respect, including one's spouse? When they criticize you. But the rabbis remind us, remember, where is this criticism coming from? Is this coming from your wife? You know who this wife is? She's an ezer kenegdecha. She's your helpmate. When Hashem created her, it wasn't just for a companion, or to cook your meals, or to do your laundry, or even to be a worker somewhere so that she should bring in another salary. It's not about that. And it's not even about children, even though marriage is also about having children, but it's an ezer. She's supposed to complement you, you're supposed to complement her. Wherever she's lacking, you hopefully will fill in. Wherever you're lacking, she will fill in. And when she criticizes you, you know what? Listen carefully, because maybe she's right. After all, the rabbis tell us women are endowed with bina yetera. They have a greater intuition, a more developed intuition than the men do. Intuition. I didn't say about other things. But they do have some intuition which enables them to see certain things, to discern certain things that the man would never know. And I talk a lot about this in other lectures. My favorite example is, imagine the man brings home a friend. Honey, I want you to meet my new partner. And of course, she doesn't know who this man is the first time she sees him. And she tells her husband quietly, I smell a rat. I don't like his face. Don't take him as a partner. I'm telling you, he's no good for you. What do you know? I went to kindergarten with him. I know him for so many years. What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. But you know what? She knows what she's talking about. She's able to see certain things that the man doesn't see. And this has repeated itself many, many times, different scenarios, where the woman was right. When it comes to certain areas in life, like business, consult with her. She just may have a better understanding or more clarity or simple intuition as to what the situation entails. Be careful not to discount her criticism, her opinion. Listen to it carefully. Weigh it, of course. Consider everything, but definitely respect it and consider it. She may be right. When a person accepts criticism, what he's saying, I'm giving a chance to this other individual, not only to speak, but to evaluate what he's saying, because maybe he's right and I am wrong. Isn't that a possibility? We're not always right. So if you reject, refuse, don't want to hear anything that is critical, you're losing out. You may be getting good advice. Pay attention, listen to criticism. It actually may help you, it may save your life. Obviously, in many marriages, this is not so easy. This is not so easy for many, many men who have a hard time accepting criticism or an opinion from their wife, and they lose out. But why is the criticism or the rebuke so important in general terms? It's not just about that the idea that they're suggesting might be right. It's not only what they're pointing out may be correct. It's more than that. Rebuke and encouragement, both, are necessary for us to mature, especially in our faith. Rebuke and encouragement are actually necessary. Otherwise, we cannot mature properly in the area of faith. If one does not want to hear, or if one does not get encouragement, we all need that from time to time, then we slow down. So these two, rebuke and encouragement, are both really necessary to mature properly. So what has happened in the past few generations, speaking about vaccinations and antibodies, the way I see it is that people simply have developed antibodies to criticism. These antibodies are defenses, walls that they've put up. Don't want to hear, don't accept, don't agree. They've developed antibodies against criticism. So now imagine, if they have these antibodies against criticism coming from others, you think they'll ever criticize themselves? They're farther and farther and farther away from self-criticism. If they cannot accept criticism from others, how are they ever going to come to something so special called self-examination and self-criticism if they can't even accept it from others? They're really, really losing out. A lot of people are not knowledgeable enough to judge, to examine themselves. What is wrong? You need to hear what others have to say, otherwise you're going to lose out. Another problem that people will have, major problem, if they don't accept criticism easily, is that they will have tremendous struggle and difficulty with Musar Hashem. Musar Hashem means the rebuke from God. And in Judaism, we more or less understand what that is. It means that when certain things happen to us in our life, it could be that God is telling us something. It's His Musar, it's His rebuke, it's His way of shaking us up. So imagine what these people are going to lose out. They're inoculated from criticism. They're not going to self-criticize themselves. But now, they're also going to have this struggle with Musar Hashem. When Hashem speaks to them and shakes them up, they're going to think it's a coincidence, bad luck. Why is this happening to me? How will he ever figure this out, that this is Musar Hashem, if the rebuke and criticism of others he doesn't accept, he doesn't welcome? He himself cannot examine himself. So you see how he loses out even with the Musar of Hashem. And what does the verse say? Musar Hashem, beni al tim'as, ki et asher yohav Hashem yochiach uche'avet ben yirtzeh. My son, despise not the discipline of God, for God chastens the ones He loves, as a father placates a son. The rebuke from Hashem is really an act of love. He loves us. He created us. But the same way a father loves his child and only means his well-being when he rebukes him and when he teaches him a lesson, the same is true with Hashem. People don't see it that way, but that's what the verse teaches us. Remember, it's the same way with the father and son, that Hashem is giving you this musar, this rebuke, this powerful shake-up, this lesson that you need to learn. But people will not take easily to it. They won't understand it. They won't relate to it if they have a hard time accepting criticism. Now I'd like to point out another point, another important point of why today especially criticism is not well received. When I say, by the way, criticism, I mean productive criticism. What you have these days is the bad type of criticism, a lot of it, not productive criticism. So since you have this terrible type of criticism out in the press, this unfortunately cancels out or does not allow a chance for the positive, constructive criticism to take hold. And the best example of this, unfortunately, is journalism, where many, many times, not always, but many, many times, you will actually see character assassination by the press, by journalists, by the media allowing themselves the liberty to assassinate the character of another human being. Who gave you that permission, that right to do so? It's okay to criticize, to point out the problems with something, perhaps things need to be done differently, but to actually assassinate someone's character and reputation, and this happens a lot these days, no one stops them. But of course you're going to hear the famous freedom of speech. You have the freedom of speech to express yourself. Yeah, but within limits. Control yourself. Be careful what you say, what you write. Freedom of speech does not give you the right to just say anything you want. We know that. But there's no clear definition today. They say, oh, you cannot slander. You have to have the facts to prove it. Of course. But that's not enough. Even if you have the facts, there's a certain way you need to present it, where you don't denigrate the person for this fault. Perhaps he doesn't know any better. Perhaps if you were to tell him in person, he would listen to you and do things differently. People are in the business of actually belittling others and assassinating their character, causing tremendous damage to society because of that. I was even thinking that perhaps one of the reasons why today everybody's wearing a mask, or they should be, especially whenever there's other people around, is because what is this mask? It's protecting our mouth. Well, maybe there's something wrong with our mouth. Otherwise, why has this become the norm today, almost in every country? Why is the mouth being covered? Because the mouth maybe should be covered. People have lost that control. And maybe here, Hashem is sending us a sign. Here, you're going to now have to cover that mouth with a mask. You haven't been doing this on your own. Be careful with your speech, with what you say about others. And I've spoken about this problem called Lashon Hara, the negative talk about others that people have no control over. So this is a reminder of how one needs to be careful with his speech. Why is that so important? When people are not careful with what they say about others, you know what that does? Automatically, it doesn't take a lot of time, it's almost automatically, they lose respect for that individual. That's it. They don't care about him. If they can talk negatively about a person, they've lost respect for him. Automatically. When you lose respect for people, you've lost also sensitivity for them. If they are in pain and in trouble, you don't respect them, you've lost sensitivity. You know where you see this a lot, unfortunately? You sometimes hear it in the news. I've seen more than one case that people have been run over, other people have walked by them and just left them alone. Didn't bother asking them if they need help. Now I know that you have to be careful in offering help to someone who is injured, but at the very least you can call the paramedics. At the very least you can perhaps be there for them. What about protecting them from being run over a second time? You know, that has happened too. People just ignore it. People who are assaulted, run over, injured, if something happens to them, people just walk by and they saw it. Or they may believe they didn't see it, but they actually saw it. They don't care. Look how people have become inoculated from this normal sensitivity that they should have as human beings for someone else. So, the way this begins, the place where it needs to begin to change is in one's home. Small steps. The only way that we can actually change is by taking small steps. And one place to start is at home, with one's wife. Listen to what she has to say. Don't start in your workplace perhaps, don't start anywhere else, start at home. Or as I said earlier, acquire a friend. Do something where you will actually be willing to force yourself to accept the opinion of others, and even if it's painful criticism. Take these small steps, because otherwise you're not going to care for their criticism, you're not going to respect them, you're going to look down at them, you won't be sensitive towards them. And what happens in a marriage when there's no respect and no sensitivity? They get divorced, the house falls apart. But they were in love. What happened to that love? It could be they were, by the way. I'm not saying it was not love. It could be that they were in love. But life takes a toll. There's all kinds of things that happen in life that sometimes tears a good relationship apart, unless you have the basic ingredients there of respect. But if you're not going to accept criticism, then the respect is also going to fall apart. And then, of course, the sensitivity. And what about the sensitivity for your children who are going to be left without a father and mother? You don't care about them? No, I care more about myself. I've had actually fathers tell this to me. I come first. How could you even think like that? You took the responsibility of getting married and bringing children into the world, and this is what you can do. Work on your marriage. I'm talking to the two of them, the wife and the husband. They should work on it. Where is the problem? Seek guidance. But if they're not willing to accept guidance or criticism from others, then it's really almost a lost case. The one who's criticizing, however, we want him to be successful, we want him to be effective too. Not just the one who's listening. The one who's giving the criticism has to also know to do the right things. So I'm just going to give you a few tips, even though I've spoken a little bit about this more in the other lecture about rebuke. A few tips to be effective. It's important to focus the criticism on the behavior, not on the person. You don't want to tell the person how bad he is, how wrong he is. You want to focus on the behavior, on the problem itself, not on him. He's a good person, he or she. It's this behavior, this is where it needs correction. The behavior, not the person. So don't attack the individual's personal character because maybe this is the way he is, he can't change so easily. Point to the behavior, to the problem that he has. Another idea is use respect, of course, and humor. Be respectful of him. Throw in a joke or two. Respect and humor. You have a better chance if you apply them that you will be understood and that your words will be taken seriously. You know, there's a very interesting saying based on the verse that Solomon says in Mishlei, Al tochach letz pen yisraeka, ochech lechacham yaveka. Don't offer rebuke to a mocker, one who will make fun of it. Offer it to someone who's wise because he will love you for it. That is a simple translation of the verse, but there's a saying based on this verse. Al tochach letz, don't tell the guy who you're criticizing, you're a letz, you're a clown, you're so-and-so. Don't point out his weaknesses. Don't say how bad he is. On the contrary, you're so smart, it's not becoming of you to behave like that. Point out how smart he is. You are so good, my son. You're so special. Look, you're so smart. This is not right. So this is the attitude, this is the approach to use, not by making fun and being disrespectful. So since people are difficult to change, you want to focus more on their actions, not on them per se. Let's try to change this instead of changing yourself. If you do so, if you focus on the actions, then no one will be able to accuse you that you're unfair and you're prejudiced. You're focused simply on a certain action, certain characteristic, not on the person himself. You have to keep in mind when you're criticizing that some people really have all kinds of problems, including a low self-esteem. And these people are going to be sensitive to criticism, not that they don't want, they're going to be sensitive to it. Some people are paranoid, narcissistic, and they put up defensive walls. Me? You don't know what you're talking about. All kinds of defensive walls for all kinds of reasons. You have to be aware of this. There's a lot of psychology in this. And that is why it's a good idea to learn some of the skills, to have the right attitude, to of course have integrity. Be careful not to assign blame for something unless you offer solutions. If you're going to assign blame for something and you're not going to offer solutions, it's better not to put the blame on him at all. If you're going to say something already that's negative, it's hurtful, then at least offer a solution, how to deal with it properly. Otherwise, don't do it. Timing is important, not when he's tired, not when he's hungry. You got to choose your time properly when things are calm. Don't go into a very long discussion of the problem because people cannot follow something which is long. Be to the point. And you have to be careful with that which may lead to depression. Sometimes people are very hard on themselves. Yes, people can be hard on themselves. And here you come and add fuel to the fire. They may become depressed, even on their own, knowing on their own that they've done something wrong. So if you're going to do something, positive reinforcement, always positive reinforcement. Yes, you're going to overcome this. You're going to deal with it properly. You're going to get the help you need. Positive reinforcement is a very important tool in helping people. When giving musar, when giving rebuke, when criticizing people, the Torah warns us, even though you have the permission, the right, the responsibility to rebuke, to criticize, but be careful that you don't commit a sin as a result by shaming him in public. Don't humiliate him. So here the Torah is telling us, yes, it's an important mitzvah. Yes, point out his mistake, tell him where he's wrong in a nice way, but don't do it in public, don't shame him. Otherwise you are committing a sin and not a mitzvah. And remember, of course, the famous rabbi's saying is, words that come out of the heart will penetrate the heart. if you're sincere about it, maybe not right away, but in the long term, those words that were said to that person may reverberate. They may echo. Oh, I recall from the past somebody saying this. And somehow, even though they may not be ready at that point in time, they will be at a later point in time. Don't give up. Say it, and hopefully, if you said it sincerely, they will have an effect sometime in the future. Okay, now that we've gone through all the tips, or some of the tips, on how to criticize and the importance of criticism, you may think that you know how to criticize. But there's one question that you need to ask yourself if you're going to be the one that's criticizing. Do you really care about him or her? That is a very important question to ask yourself. Do you really care about them? Let me share with you an incredible story that will basically illustrate this point. In Israel, there was a particular school that had a dilemma. One of the students was misbehaving. It, of course, was a bad example, bad influence for the other students. And sometimes after trying everything, all forms of discipline, if it doesn't work, you basically think that the right thing to do is to kick him out. That's what a lot of principals would do. A lot of teachers cannot handle the child, and it's a bad influence for the rest, and it makes some sense, I mean, depending on what he's doing. So there was a teacher or a principal that was unsure as to what to do, and he was weighing the pros and cons of throwing out the child, because if you do throw out a child, even though you're protecting the kids, on the other hand, this child eventually can become a criminal. I mean, he can go off the path, and you may ruin his life by not having given him an opportunity to correct himself. So it's not so simple to just throw a child out. You really have to weigh it properly. So they went to consult with the great rabbi of blessed memory, Rabbi Steinemann, if you heard of him. Rabbi, what to do? This is the problem. So the rabbi turns to the principal and asks him, what's the name of the mother of the child? Now that's a very interesting question. So the principal says, I don't know the name of the mother. You don't know the name of the mother? That means you never prayed for him. Because in Judaism, you know, when we're praying for someone who's sick, we use his name and his mother's name. You don't know the mother's name. That means that you've never prayed for his well-being. You never prayed for his welfare. You never prayed for him to be able to come out of this problem. You never asked Hashem for assistance in dealing with this problem. If you've never prayed for him, that means you haven't tried everything. How dare you think about throwing him out? Not only that, the rabbi was implying, if you didn't pray for him, that means you don't really care about him. Because what does it cost to pray? At the very least, the bare minimum, if you can't help someone, pray for him. Like you pray for people who are sick. We can't help him. He has a major problem. Pray for him. And by the way, pray for yourself too. People don't realize the importance of prayer. Pray for yourself, pray for others. It doesn't take that much. People don't understand the value and the power of prayer. We just finished, thank God, after 4 years, 138 lectures on every single verse of Tehillim, Psalms. We went through every single verse. Look how much effort David put into this book, this composition of prayers and songs and praises to God. A very powerful book to say, to use. We went through every single verse and we saw the depth of those words, the meaning behind them. Just like to make the following recommendation. These days, there is another concept going around called herd immunity. Have you heard about that? Herd, the masses, I think that's what it's called. They say the more people that get the virus, hopefully that will cause them to be immune, because it's a herd, it's a herd as a group. So they don't have anything to fear. Herd immunity, they call it. Be careful with that concept in a different way. A lot of people think, well, this is the way the world is today. It's a herd. Everybody's pretty much in the same boat. Everybody's acting the same way. And when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. You can't change the world anyway. If you can't beat them, join them, they say. Everybody's like that. Just do what everyone else does. Be careful of this herd immunity, this immunity from criticism, this immunity from wanting to make any changes in their life, not caring about others. Be careful with that. Because the rabbis tell us, "B'makom she'en ish, yishtatel liyot ish." If you're living in a place where there is no ish, there is no one who's behaving himself, doing the right thing, then you be the one. Just because no one else is doing it, doesn't mean that you should be like them. In the country, be careful. Remember, if everyone is wrong, that does not give you the permission to be wrong. You be the right one. You do the right thing, even though everyone else will be against you, even though everyone else will laugh at you. It makes no difference. As long as you know that this is the truth, stick to it. And finally, last but not least, I want to remind you that the power of prayer is very, very powerful. It's so powerful that it will not only strengthen our connection with God, it will also transform us as human beings to be kinder, God willing, and more sensitive to other people as well. Amen.